Wind howled across the rooftop as Brooke, the arrogant white CEO, laughed at the sight of a tired black man mopping near her helicopter. "Tell you what," she sneered, her designer heels echoing against the concrete. "If you can fly this chopper, I'll marry you right now." Her assistants chuckled behind her, the kind of laughter that stings harder than words. But Malik, the homeless veteran, didn't flinch. His eyes steady, his voice calm. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I don't need your marriage. I just need a chance." That line hit like thunder, the type that makes silence louder than noise. If this already made your blood boil, hit like and subscribe right now, because stories like this are still happening, and the world needs to hear them. Brooke smirked, walking closer, circling him like prey. "Chance? You think a black man off the streets could fly a $2 million helicopter?" Her tone dripped with disbelief. Malik's fingers brushed the aircraft's frame, slow, respectful, like someone touching an old friend. "Ma'am, I've flown machines tougher than this one. Give me 10 minutes, and I'll prove it." Her laughter was cold, cruel. "You? Fly my chopper? Please. You probably don't even know where the ignition is." Malik simply met her eyes. "I know more than you think." Brooke's laughter echoed over the city skyline. 10 minutes, she mocked. "You wouldn't even know which side is the front." Her assistants grinned nervously. They weren't sure if they were laughing with her or at her cruelty. Malik stood tall, dust clinging to his jacket, the weight of years etched across his dark skin. "I know control panels," he said softly, "even when they don't belong to me." Brooke folded her arms. "And what are you? Some kind of street pilot?" Her words hit like stones, but Malik's calm didn't break. "I used to fly before the streets became home." Brooke scoffed. "Sure you did. Probably flew paper planes behind the shelter." He didn't respond, just turned toward the helicopter, eyes tracing every curve of the machine. Something about his focus unnerved her. "Touch it and you're in jail," she snapped. Malik paused, then nodded respectfully. "Then I'll just stand here and imagine what fly again feels like." For the first time that morning, Brooke didn't have a comeback. The silence between them grew heavy, not from fear, but from truth. Something about this man wasn't adding up, and that made her nervous. Brooke's confidence started to waver as Malik's calm stare lingered. "Ma'am," he said, "you keep saying I can't fly this, but what if I can?" Brooke tilted her head. "Then pigs can fly too." She tried to laugh again, but his steady tone unsettled her. Malik stepped closer to the chopper, eyes scanning the engine vents, the tail rotor, the glass cockpit. "Airbus H-145, he murmured, almost to himself. "Twin engine, fenestrine tail, beautiful machine." Brooke froze. "How do you even know that?" He smiled faintly. "Because I've flown one before. Different color, same soul." The rooftop fell silent. Even the assistants stopped pretending to type on their phones. Brooke crossed her arms tighter. "You're bluffing." Malik looked straight at her. "Give me 10 minutes inside the cockpit. If I don't know every switch by memory, you can call security." Her jaw clenched. "You're insane." "Maybe," he said, "but you're the one who made the offer." Brooke checked her watch, sighing in disbelief. Yet something in his voice stopped her from walking away. "Fine," she hissed. 10 minutes. You mess up even once, you're done." Malik's expression didn't change. "That's all I need, ma'am. If this happened right in front of you, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if you want justice as much as I do, hit subscribe." Brooke stood with arms crossed as Malik climbed into the cockpit. "You've got 15 minutes, she said coldly. He nodded, flipping switches with calm precision that didn't belong to a man from the streets. Battery master on. Fuel levels normal. Rotor brake released. The instrument lights came alive one by one, casting a glow across his dark, focused face. Brooke leaned in, her smirk faltering. "How do you even know what you're touching?" Malik's voice didn't waver. "Because I used to fly birds that carried soldiers home." She blinked. "You were military?" 160th Night Stalkers, ma'am. 23 years in the sky. The rotor began to hum, wind swirling across the pad. Brooke's hair whipped wildly as the helicopter rose a few feet off the ground. Perfectly balanced, steady. Her mockery turned to awe. "You weren't bluffing," she whispered. Malik smiled faintly. "No, ma'am. I never needed to." For the first time, she saw not a homeless man, but a pilot who had survived more storms than she could imagine. Her arrogance was cracking, and respect was finally finding its way in. As the rotor slowed to silence, Brooke could still feel her heart racing. She stepped closer, her voice quieter now. "Why didn't you tell anyone who you were?" Malik looked down at his scarred hands. "Because nobody listens to a black man in rags, ma'am. They see dirt, not service. They see a mistake, not a man." Brooke's chest tightened. The same lips that mocked him an hour ago now struggled to form words. "You flew for our country and ended up on the streets?" He nodded. "After the war, the battles didn't stop. PTSD, divorce, drinking. I lost my family, my home, my purpose. But I never lost my license or my faith that one day I'd fly again." The confession hit her harder than any insult ever could. She had called him worthless. Yet here he was, a man who once carried soldiers through fire. "I was wrong," she said softly. "I thought you were nobody." Malik met her eyes. "Everyone's somebody, ma'am. Some of us just fall harder than others." Brooke turned toward the helicopter again, her reflection trembling in the glass. For the first time in her career, she felt ashamed of her power. Brooke stood beside Malik, watching the morning light paint the sky gold. "What will you do now?" she asked quietly. Malik shrugged. "Probably go back to the shelter. They hold my spot till noon." Her chest tightened again. That answer didn't sit right. She looked at him, at the man who had just proved her wrong in every possible way. "No," she said firmly. "You're not going back there." He frowned. "Ma'am, I don't expect favors." "This isn't a favor, Malik. It's correction. You'll fly for me. Full-time pilot. Decent pay, housing, respect. Everything you earned long ago." Malik froze, disbelief softening into gratitude. "Why me?" he whispered. Brooke met his eyes. "Because when I mocked you, you stayed calm. When I doubted you, you delivered. That's the kind of strength this company needs, the kind of man I should have been smart enough to see." For a long moment, neither spoke. The city noise below faded into silence. Then Malik extended his hand. Firm, steady. "Thank you, ma'am, for seeing me this time." Brooke shook it, tears threatening her perfect composure. "Just promise me one thing," she said softly. "Never stop flying." 2 months later, the same rooftop looked different. The helicopter shimmered under the sunrise, its blades still, waiting. Malik stood beside it. Clean uniform, confident smile, purpose in his eyes again. Brooke walked up carrying 2 coffees. "You're early," she said. He chuckled. "Old habits, ma'am. Soldiers don't sleep when there's work to do." Since that morning, everything had changed. Malik now trained new recruits for her company's aviation program, a special initiative Brooke launched for homeless veterans. The same woman who once mocked a man's struggle was now building paths for others to rise. "Never thought I'd see a CEO fight for people like me," Malik said. Brooke smiled. "You taught me what leadership actually means." He looked out at the city, the same streets that once broke him. "Funny," he murmured. "I used to look up at the sky and wonder if I'd ever belong there again." Brooke stepped closer. "Now you own it, Malik." The rotor blades began to spin, catching the light like hope itself. He climbed into the cockpit, turned to her with a smile. "Ready for takeoff?" She nodded. "Always." The helicopter lifted, a black man flying high above the city that once ignored him. This time, everyone looked up. If you believe this should never happen again, share this now. And to my USA, UK, and Canadian viewers, your voice is power. Use it.